Hi crafty folks, today I'm going to show you another idea to use up some of that pattern paper, and I'm going to combine it with some delicate die cuts. So I have a couple die sets here. I will link whatever products are still available below the video, but I'm going to jump right in and show you some of the products that I'm going to use. I did already die cut out some pattern paper and one of these florals, and I'm going to show you how I tie it together to create this card here. So here's a photo of it. I'm going to show you how I added some interesting little details to it, and do stick around to the end. I'm going to show you kind of an unorthodox way to use this die set and create something a little bit different. So here you can see I actually stacked a couple of these Pink Fresh Studio dies together. I did use my new Artist Hack microdots to do that, and these are like Sculpey clay tools. I don't know the exact name of them, but I have this on a piece of foam just to kind of allow it some give, and I'm rolling this Sculpey detail tool kind of in the middle of this die cut in order to round it. Now I saw this genius tip from Chris Stokes. I will link her video below. She is brilliant with the clean and simple cards, and I saw her do this with a similar little floral die cut, and my mind was blown. So I'm basically just kind of rolling this rounded tool and pushing it into the foam, and it's basically going to give this die cut some rounding and some dimension. And I'm going to show you how I support that on the card in a moment here, but I'm just kind of working back and forth. I have different size tools here, but I'm just kind of starting at the center and doing a circular motion while I'm pressing it to kind of round the shape of this floral die cut. And this really does create such a cool effect. Now this particular die isn't really ideal because you can see it does have the little cutouts. This would be easier with a die cut that had like a full bloom rather than these little die cut pieces. But the way that I kind of glued it together, they seem to be staying in place. But just to let you know, this isn't really ideal. It is better if you have like a little full bloom to work with, but you get the idea here. And I'm just kind of working through the different blooms on this die cut to get as much rounding as I can. And then you'll see I do end up having a solution to kind of keep those rounded parts from getting crushed down into the design. So I did kind of add little, I don't know, stray paper onto my foam here, but I'm just kind of pushing it back in because I want to make sure these little parts don't come flying out in my design. But when I do adhere it down to the card, I end up kind of holding it together a little bit with some foam pieces here. So once I decide that this is rounded enough, I will add it to my design, but I'm really kind of just taking my time and working through from the center outward just to kind of get as much dimension as I can on these little blooms. So you can see that one is really wanting to pop out. So I'm kind of trying to be careful here and make sure I don't mess that up. But you can see, look at the rounding on that. It just adds so much to it, especially if you do like a clean and simple white on white. So here is my new Artist Hack. These are microdots. You may have heard of these. I only recently got them, and I just did a video about them, trying them out for the first time. But I'm going to use that over the entire back because I want there to be some adhesive on the little thin stem parts, because I do want that to have some tack down onto that pattern paper. So I'm going to do that first. You basically pull back the top sheet and then you burnish it with your hands. I'm kind of doing it gently because I don't want to lose the dimension that I just created with the rounding. But I'm burnishing it from the back, and it's going to put all these little tiny micro dots of glue all over the whole back. Now the way that I'm going to get the little blooms to pop up and not get crushed down is with these little foam dots. So you can see here I'm kind of finagling these foam squares in such a way that the little die cuts in the center of the bloom won't pop out. Now again, you wouldn't have this issue if you did a little die cut that had the bloom the full bloom, so you wouldn't have to worry about this. But I'm just kind of mindful of where the little details are, so I can kind of hold it together as well as give it the dimension with these little popped up foam pieces. Now ideally you probably wouldn't want to do black, It doesn't show or anything on the card when it's finished, but if you had little foam circles or little foam dots, whatever you have, this is the way to really reinforce that cool rounding dimension that you just put in with that technique. So I'm fiddling here a little bit, trying to get these little backer pieces off without pulling out the little detail cuts within the blooms. But like I said, this will be a lot easier if you did a different die. And I do come back later the same day and figure out other little floral dies that I do have in my stash to kind of make this work. So I decided to push this down, so the adhesive on the back of the foam dots is really going to allow me to keep the floral bits up, and then I push down the stems more flush with that die cut paper, and then that will help adhere that as well. And then I decided to put the whole oval shebang also on these micro dots, because it's just an easy way to add adhesive. It doesn't have to be little fiddly dies. It can also be a full sheet of your paper or your panel or whatever you want to do. So this is just a fun way to kind of add adhesive quickly to your card. And then I'm going to pull back this top sheet and pull this off, and then I'm able to attach it directly to my card. So I'm really excited to have these micro dots in my crafty stash. I feel like it's a bit of a game changer. And if for some reason you don't have full coverage on the back, you can just kind of slap it down on a different part of the sheet where there's still adhesive, and then you can pull some up to kind of cover the rest. So I'm just going to attach this directly to a card base of 110 pound Neenah Classic Crest Solar White. I decide to leave it without a sentiment because I think you don't always need to have a sentiment. And then this way, if I do want to add one later on, I can really customize the card. So this is a fun way to kind of keep cards in your stash. Either leave them blank or just kind of leave them without a sentiment, and then you can customize them as needed. So I'm just going to push this down. I do find that the micro dots, once you apply the pressure, that tends to make them more permanent. So that's going to finish this card. You can see that awesome dimension, not only from the rounding of the blooms, but also from the little foam dots behind it. I'm so pleased with how this one turned out. Such a quick way to use up some pattern paper and some die cuts for your cards. Now here is the other card. This is kind of a bonus way to use it. When I was die cutting it out, I thought, wow, that silhouette that's left behind on the die cut is so pretty on its own. So I just backed it with some gray colored cardstock and slapped that oval down on another piece of pattern paper. So this is a fun way to use up your pattern paper and those delicate die cuts and add some unique, unexpected dimensions. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I'll check you next time. Thanks.